Now we will hear from Claudia Saus-Navarre of the Inter-American Development Bank, who will discuss the strategic objectives for the development of their BIM cost-benefit methodology. Over to Claudia.
To you today. Thank you so much for the invitation. We're very happy to be at the Global Summit again. It's always a very interesting space to learn a lot from what other countries are doing in this field. So today they asked me to talk about the evaluation methodology of BIM use in public construction projects. And I thought I'd start talking about what is the IDB and why we are interested in this, in the measurement of BIM results. So IDB is a multilateral development bank. We provide financing to governments in Latin America and the Caribbean for the development of different public investment projects, be it in the infrastructure sector, in the education sector, and so on and so forth. We also provide not only financing, but also technical assistance, and we do capacity building to be able to improve the quality of policy design and implementation. And we work not only with the infrastructure sector, but also in fields such as innovation and digital transformation, which is what's studied and promoted in the division I work for. So looking at BIM, we see that the usage of BIM in the region is still quite incipient. As you can see in the graph to your right of the screen, it's a relatively new technology for Latin America, and the construction industry is just recently starting to use it. But from the government side, we increasingly see interest in starting to implement BIM in public works, and lots of interest in developing public national strategies to support BIM adoption in different countries. So in this context, IDB has commissioned the development of a methodology to measure results from BIM implementation in public sector projects. We have hired a Spanish engineering and construction firm called INECO, and we are basically in the middle of the development of this methodology. It's a work in progress still. We are expecting to finish it around early next year. And the idea is that this methodology hopefully will help to accelerate BIM adoption throughout the region. So how is this methodology being developed? Well, first, INECO started reviewing all existing methodologies for evaluating infrastructure projects using BIM, gathering information from existing case studies and different private sector experiences that have been documented. And all this information just confirmed the wide diversity of methodologies to measure BIM that are being used in the industry, both quantitative and qualitative. It also confirmed what we thought was an issue in Latin America, but apparently it's a shared issue related to the difficulty of actually using data to create control groups that help us measure the exact impact that BIM has on our infrastructure projects. So this issue that economists call attribution, what portion of the improvements in performance in our projects are due to the actual use of BIM and what portion is not. And there's a lot less literature and experience in doing this in the industry. And finally, we were looking also for experiences in Latin America and the Caribbean, or at least with data, performance data from projects in Latin America and the Caribbean. We found this to be super scarce. And although we are interested in measuring performance in projects that use BIM, we also are looking for information on performance from projects that do not use BIM to use as comparisons. And that data also is proving to be quite scarce.
Excusez-moi, mais je viens de me rebrancher.
After this initial review, the methodology is right now being developed with regards as to its core content. First of all, I'm going to tell you a little bit more in detail of this in the next slides, but INECO proceeded to define what sort of benefits we would be measuring and how we would measure them through different indicators and KPIs, basically related to costs, time, and quality of the project. We are in the process right now of finishing the definition of KPIs and doing the validation with project experts in a few countries. And when this is developed, we will try out the methodology in 3 pilots. We are choosing 3 pilots in 3 different countries in Latin America and the Caribbean. When we have been able to try it out in these countries, we hope we can iterate and finish a complete methodology, which we expect to be available, as I was saying, early next year. So the type of measurement of BIM results we're expecting to be able to get in our projects are twofold. First of all, we're trying to get indicators that are going to allow us to measure before and after interventions along the life cycle of a project. This means we will be able to compare actual performance indicators versus initially programmed indicators. And second, we are also going to be able to compare BIM results in a project with the performance results obtained in a comparable project in differences approach. So what are some of the, going a little bit deeper into the actual methodology, we, in the definition of BIM benefits and KPIs, this, I was saying we're right in the middle of this, the firm is right in the middle of this exercise. But we basically started from the definition of BIM uses by Penn State, and we increased the number of types of benefits that Penn State initially listed. And then we did a weaving out process and standardization of these benefits, and we came out with this list of 18 benefits we're going to be measuring with different KPIs in order to facilitate comparisons among projects. KPIs are going to be always defined with a specific formula and a protocol for data collection, and they will always be expressed in percentage terms just to ensure comparability among different project types. Okay, so this issue of comparability is very important for us because we're going to be working in many different countries, many different sectors, and as you know, this is a very hard thing to achieve. The other thing we are being careful with is trying to select KPIs and the KPI data collection protocol in such a way that it's aligned with mainstream practices in today's industry. That means we don't want to overburden project teams with having to collect very difficult data or non-existing data. And this is why we are trying to make this as easy to implement as possible. So we are going to collect data, as I was saying, at the project level from our different kinds of infrastructure projects. We're going to be also collecting information from comparable projects that have not used BIM to use as our control groups. And in order to build this comparable projects, potential control groups, the methodology is making a difference between 3 types of variables. In order to classify and compare projects, we will be looking at external data from the country, from the sector, at project data that's not related to BIM, be it the type of contract, the phase of the life cycle of the project we're focusing on, etc., budgets, for instance. And we will also be looking at BIM internal variables. Under the BIM internal variables, we are going to collect data about the common data environment, about the BIM team, about the extent of the BIM execution plan, and so forth, just to be able to illustrate that there's also different ways that a project can implement BIM. It's not so. In order to be able to map out all the different aspects that a project is implementing related to how to implement BIM, actually, we are proposing a very thorough data collection in that regard too. So we expect to finish with a sort of dashboard. This is, of course, something very initial, where we're going to be able to do more easily all the data analytics to compare projects. And what we're doing in order to be able to prove and try out the methodology at the pilot level is we're choosing projects that already know they already have a sort of rigorous control groups that we can test the methodology with. So one of the pilots, for instance, going to be in Costa Rica, where we're going to measure the performance on one portion of a road construction project that's using BIM. And we're going to compare it to another portion of a road project that's not using BIM. In the case of Uruguay, one of the alternatives we're exploring is also doing a measurement of the building of one type of education construction that's done by an agency that actually finances several of these constructions, which are relatively similar. And that's why we're trying to, as I was saying, to look for projects that will have easy to use comparison groups. Going forward, though, the idea is to start collecting data to be able to develop a project database that going forward is going to be useful to measure different kinds of projects that want to measure BIM performance. So we will be little by little, our idea is to start building this database with inputs from the different countries and start accumulating this data so future control groups will be easier to design. So we are expecting, so the expected impact of the methodology, as I was saying in the beginning, we want this to be a really practical tool for both project managers from IDB and multilateral institutions and government counterparts. We are very optimistic in the results we expect from its implementation. We believe making the measurement of results easier is going to actually foster increased adoption and investment in BIM in the region by our governments in the LAC region. And we believe this is going to happen two ways. One, because using BIM results and comparable data from BIM projects, we hope we can accelerate the learning process of the what and how BIM works at the project level. So we will be able to correct or avoid possible mistakes sooner than later. And second, we believe that having more data available and more quantitative data available is also going to be able to better illustrate use cases of BIM in the region. And this is going also to be able to help us compare among different projects that is something we are not able to do right now. So we are very, 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 very optimistic in the importance of the tool we are developing, and we really are looking forward to discussing this with all of you in the question and answer session. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudia, and thank you again to both Claudia and Milena for their informative presentations. It's clear that within the diversity of digital maturity between European states and the Americas, there are many similarities in the strategic approach to measuring the benefits of BIM, as well as within the methodology itself. At this time, I'd like to invite Milena and Claudia to turn their cameras on for a short discussion. We welcome audience comment at this time. Please feel free to comment on the chat feature, and thank you for your questions. You may also let us know of your experience of using BIM cost-benefit methodology by taking part in our Slido poll. As a reminder, today's event is being held in English, Spanish, French, and Japanese. You should see at the bottom of your screen the option to select your language. We'll now start by asking Milena a question on her presentation. So during your presentation, Milena, you mentioned the EU Green Deal, which has set some ambitious objectives for sustainable infrastructure delivery and maintenance in the coming years. How does the cost-benefit analysis tool support the transition to a green economy in Europe?
Thank you for the nice question. Actually, as you might know, the Green Deal has the ambitious plan to implement some legal or recommendable issues by 2030 and 2050 to supply clean, affordable, and secure energy energy, to ensure that we use more recycling and more more actions to protect the environment in many ways. And as you have seen, the cost-benefit analysis includes certain indicators which already include the CO2 emissions and health and safety improvement as indicators for the benefits or for the costs referring to BIM. But what we also think would be very helpful in the future to include further indicators. Let's say if we say adaptation and resilience to climate change, this could be a very important issue. And I think this is not only a matter of how much it would cost, but how far it will improve our lives or benefit to our well-being. Resource efficiency and material flows in terms of recycling could be another important indicator. Or very important too is the efficiency of water use. We have to concentrate on materials in general terms, but water specifically. So, I think it's just the beginning of our journey, because we just started to get a monetary idea how far we can calculate costs and benefits. But bearing in mind the current initiatives, the current developments, I think we should update it and add further criteria, and therefore support the Green Deal of the European Commission.
Lovely. Thank you so much for your answer. And I'm sure that Claudia is going to pick on some of those impacts in this question. So, Claudia, over to you. What are the drivers behind governments in Latin America and the Caribbean wanting to adopt national strategies in built environment information management? And related to that, how do you think that the IDB cost-benefit methodology will help in those nations building the case for a national initiative?
Thank you very much, Alana and Milena, also for the time, the invitation, and the opportunity to be here with you today. So I think in Latin America, cost efficiency is driving most of the decision by governments to start investing and promoting BIM in public works. I think that the moment where we are at right now with fiscal constraints, strong fiscal constraints in the region due to the pandemic crisis, is only making it more appealing than before. So I think we actually have an opportunity to keep moving this forward. In Latin America, I think a second driver is related to transparency. The ability of this methodology and in general digital tools to give more transparency about what's going on with the resources, the use of resources in public work projects is another of the very important drivers I see in the region. And I think thirdly, some governments are interested in the digital transformation of their productive sectors, construction being one of them. And we have, although this has not been a key driver in the past, I think due to the current pandemic moment we are facing and the increased push for digital transformation across the board, I think this is gaining more momentum. But our methodology about, you were asking, what do we see, how this would push these drivers going forward? I think we have a strong linkage with the cost efficiency driver. Our idea is that having more quantitative data that's actually relatable to Latin American projects is going to be able to not only make governments that are on the fence decide to start investing in BIM, but also it's going to help governments that have already decided to timidly start investing in pilots, say, think of scaling this up. So we are counting that this methodology it's different than the EU's necessities of an ex-post methodology, but we think that this its ability to leverage future investments is there in being able to demonstrate what happened with the investments governments did, however small they were, and then being able to build on that. But I think that what Milena was saying about this being the first step, I think that this is very important. It's we view this too, continuously with the inclusion of more data, the methodology is going to become more precise. And I think in this precise, reaching in this objective of making it more precise, it's going to be very important that we ensure that we have a lot of data. So the more users we have in this methodology, the better it will be measuring actual benefits or net benefits from them. And thus, governments will have a more precise tool to decide their investments upon.
Fantastic. Thank you for your answer. And thank you to both of you, Milena and Claudia. Unfortunately, we're very short on time, and I know that we could keep this conversation going for quite a while. So with that, we'll close the discussion, and both of you may turn your cameras off. And I know that this conversation has been useful to those in our network who are currently developing business cases for BIM across nations or across their organization. With that, we will now open panel 2, From Policy to Implementation, a discussion of procurement practices from around the world. I'm delighted to introduce you to Luke Belfield, who is Acting Chief Engineer for the Office of Projects Victoria, to discuss Australia's federated approach to procurement. After Luke's presentation, we will have a roundtable conversation with panelists from the Global BIM Network Steering Committee. And now, over to Luke.
Hello from Australia. My name is Luke Belfield, and I'm the Acting Victorian Chief for the Government of Victoria. I will present an overview of our work, and more specifically the Digital Build Program and the recently released Digital Asset Policy. To set the scene, Australia is facing an infrastructure boom, which is pretty similar to a lot of other locations around the world. As you can see here, the wave of incoming infrastructure projects being delivered is very large. Victoria is a significant contributor to Australia's pipeline, with a spend of 144 billion Australian dollars, which is equivalent to about 80 billion UK pounds. We recognise that not only will these assets be built in the next 5 to 10 years, but will need to be maintained for the next 50 to 100 years. And the construction industry building this pipeline has a long way to go to improve its practices, especially in comparison to other sectors. Currently, construction is one of the lowest digitised sectors, just above hunting and agriculture, as you can see on the right. And we are looking at how we can improve this for Australia. So it's important before we get into the detail to just highlight the role, or where Office of Projects Victoria sits within Victorian Government, which is where I'm housed. So the Victorian State Government has 9 departments. OPV, Office of Projects Victoria, sits within Department of Treasury and Finance, which has a central role in providing oversight across all of the government portfolios, as well as providing systemic improvements across them as well for projects. This means initiatives we deliver have an impact across transport, justice, education, health, and many other infrastructure project portfolios. In addition to a whole of government perspective, we also deliver technical project support to some of Australia's largest or biggest infrastructure projects being led out of Victoria. My organisation's objective is to improve Victorian major infrastructure project delivery and efficiency by providing unique insights, practical tools and support. So to this end, we are focusing our efforts on relieving what we've determined to be the big 4 repeat pain points for Victorian infrastructure projects. They're aiming to improve planning processes with streamlined digital submissions and approvals, make tendering and procurement easier and cheaper with digital submissions, comparisons and standards taken from one contract to the next, enhance our ability to measure genuine and current project performance with analytics, dashboards and improved data, and leverage the technology to improve design and engineering practice with enhanced visualizations and tools such as class detection. This is a significant job, but we've already started by setting up a program of works called the Digital Build Program. Our Digital Build Program is funded to drive whole of government transformation, to build a smarter government and bring our delivery partners in industry along with us, and we're underway. We released our Victorian Digital Asset Strategy in March 2020. We built upon this guidance document to deliver a program of works called the Digital Build Program, to build a smarter major projects pipeline and deliver better outcomes for Victorians through better information management. As I mentioned earlier, while we have a focus on project delivery, we recognise that projects deliver a service for people. Therefore, it is vitally important to note that decisions made at the front end of the project lifecycle have a significant impact on the way that they hand it over into operations, and therefore the potential benefits or services they deliver for people. So I've mentioned digital assets a few times, but what is a digital asset? At its core, it is the associated data that is required to be generated or developed in order to build a physical asset and bring it into service. I want to highlight that we're not just talking about 3D information and visualization such as digital twins, but all project data such as time, cost, procurement and supply chain information that's required to deliver an asset. It is also being smarter about the way we use data and having an ability, once a translatable structure has been determined and set, to integrate project data streams. So for example, being able to combine cost and time information to drive a cash flow, or combining time and design and engineering data to be able to undertake constructability analysis. By understanding this associated information and its influence on project delivery, this diagram explains the comparison between traditional projects and our new way of working. Currently depicted in the red line, we have projects losing information quality and value when information is handed over between parties or project stages. Through good digital information management, we're reducing the loss of information and improving projects before they start, and importantly, when they're handed over into operations, resulting in reduced errors, faster and less costly projects, and improved operational or service outcomes. To tackle this issue, it really requires a change management approach, as a lot of the technology to do this is already in existence. We are undertaking initiatives across process technology and people to ensure this is not simply a technology-based problem or solution, and we bring people along the journey and they ultimately see and experience the benefits of this for their projects. Within our digital build program, we have our digital assets workstream and our offsite construction workstream. In the digital assets workstream, we've released the digital asset policy, which I'll talk about in a minute. We're also delivering pilots to demonstrate good practice, part of the change management journey, capture the benefits and share this across government. We're currently developing, so to speak, a menu of initiatives that a project could implement to improve their performance. This is founded on considering the whole of government layer, where important interactions with, for instance, planning approvals or central agency project performance reporting is required, a project layer to highlight the different silos of data within a project, and an application layer, which looks at the digital interface project teams use to develop and interact with their data. So for instance, a scheduler using Primavera P6. These learnings will then be used more broadly across government. We also have an offsite construction workstream, which is looking to normalise modern methods of construction for government. We're delivering policy, guidance, contractual clauses and training to support this. As mentioned initially, in September, we released our digital asset policy. Pictured here is our Treasurer, the Victorian Treasurer, releasing this at the Built Environment Summit, which is a public forum held in Australia. It is also important to note that the Treasurer has been a great supporter of our digital build program. This policy lays a powerful foundation for digital practice for our government project teams. This work is informed by the learnings of many different jurisdictions, as well as international good practice, such as the International Standard for Information Management, ISO 19650. This is an extract from the construction phase of the investment lifecycle from this document. The lifecycle that projects must follow and is supported by continuous performance reporting requirements, as well as assurance processes. As you can see, requirements are graduated according to a project's risk and value profile and arranged in themes. This allows requirements to be fit for purpose, so we're not applying the same requirements of a complex heavy rail project to that of an ambulance station. It has also been designed to be easily navigated using plain English. In implementing the policy, I wanted to highlight the importance of plain English. And it's one of the successes for us in engaging, getting take up from our project, BIM, digital engineering and data standards. Instead of us learning IT language, we're working on translating that into language our project teams understand and use. This has worked to get us better engaged, but it will keep the success of the project and enable us to talk at a leadership level and get them to really understand why this is important. So what's next? We are piloting our digital build system by undertaking pilots with major projects and project organisations and gathering performance data to capture the benefits of good information management. We're also delivering standardised contractual clauses in support of the recently released digital asset policy, which will then enable requirements to flow down from our government project teams to the government contractors and subcontractors, as well as the advisors that we have used on projects. We'll also look to update our guidance as well as develop asset standards, as we know this transformation needs to be tackled from multiple dimensions. So thank you for your time today, and thanks to the Global BIM Network for the opportunity to present. Thank you, and please reach out if you wish to discuss our approach or have further questions.
Thank you, Luke. We will now start our live panel discussion. Speakers, if you can turn your cameras on, I will introduce you. Representing Australia is Matthew Kehoe, Director of the Digital Build Program for the Office of Projects Victoria. Coming back to us and representing the Czech Republic is Jaroslav Nehyba, Director of the BIM Strategy Department at the Czech Agency for Standardization. And moderating our discussion today is Roger Grant, Executive Director for Building Information Management at the National Institute of Building Sciences in the United States. We also invite you to let us know about your procurement practices by participating in our Slido poll. Now, over to Roger.
Thanks, Alana, and hello, greetings, Matthew and Jaroslav. Good to be here with you today to talk about public procurement and all the related activities that go along with setting up for that. It was very interesting, Matthew, to see Luke present on the efforts underway in Victoria. I was struck by the way your program is focused in two broad areas, and I thought we might just talk a little bit about, I think a lot of public procurement practice has to do with making the transition from planning and strategizing to moving to implementation. And once you're implementing, how do you organize that in a way that connects with your stakeholders? And so I thought that selection of digital assets, digital build, and offsite construction, whether conscious or not, was an interesting way to connect to the organizations you're going to be procuring from. And maybe if you could comment on that a little bit. I'd also say one other thing. I looked through your presentation and I only saw BIM mentioned once in all the slides. So maybe you could also talk a little bit about the strategy part to maybe resonate with the other public agencies that are on the line, how you've organized the strategy and then connected it to procurement.
Sure.
Or planning.
Sure. Well, thank you, Roger, for the great questions, and thanks for having us today from Australia. The first question about the two work streams that we've got, the offsite construction and the digital side of it, why we chose to run them side by side within the same program is really because they're so integrated offsite construction, prefabrication, modularization leverages a lot of BIM approaches, using asset libraries, regular kit of parts approaches. And because they're so integrated, they really snowball the effect. If we can get digital in practice through offsite construction, it becomes normalized and we get that supply uptake. So that was a strategic effort on that. And the second question about our language or our choice of language, you've picked up on, it is really deliberate. There's some comments that have come through in the bottom, and there's quite good debate in the chat about BIM, digital engineering, information management. What's the right approach here? And we don't think there is one language to rule them all. All of these languages have their place, and there was a great comment, I think, from Isla about we've got to build consensus on this language. It's an evolving landscape. We've chosen to go towards the information management language because that resonates with our projects. Our project people are not technicians, they're construction engineers. They live in that construction world and that language. And we really have to make the effort as experts to put it in their language. There's been lots of BIM strategies and BIM efforts that have failed because the language is too technical, that it doesn't get strategic support at an executive level. We've observed that, and we've deliberately made an effort to put all our policies in plain English so we can get that uptake.
Oh, great. That's interesting. I did notice the emphasis on language and how you were looking to align that with the procurers, with the organizations you're looking to procure from, and I suppose the constituents that are working on your projects. So that's interesting, and I think as a public agency thinking about, you have to think about what you need to do internally to utilize the technology, but also being very conscious about who's going to be receiving that. And that those requests is really important to think about. And so I guess you've made that a very conscious strategy. That's interesting. And has the private sector, I guess you're just now getting to start pilot projects, so you'll find out how that resonates, but perhaps you've already had discussions that led to this decision, focus, emphasis?
Yes, we really engage with the private sector a lot. Our success or failure depends on it. So the biggest conversation we have with the private sector in developing our strategy is, where are the pain points in procurement? What's the hard points for them? Because if it becomes cheaper and easier for the private sector to engage with government, that's cheaper and easier for us. That's cheaper for the citizen who we're working for. So we're asking them, is it what hurts for you? Is it in the manual processes? Is it in the changing standards from one project to the next? Is it in a lack of digitization or changing technology from every project to the next? So we're asking those questions and getting answers to inform our strategy.
Yeah, and I like that, what that might offer to the rest of us around the world that are working in this same way to organize procurement, move from planning into implementation, and that making sure we're using common and interpretable language is really important. So maybe Jaroslav, along the same vein, you could comment. I understand in the Czech Republic, you're working on a program to upskill the procurers in different agencies to try to achieve some level of, can I interpret, to try and achieve some level of common utilization of procurement practices and language and the language associated with that?
Yes, I can fully confirm what Matthew said previously, because I feel it's very important to speak with one language or terminology, and able understand each other as the humans is the first step. But of course, we need to find the common digital language for our software tools as well, because we are looking and we are talking about digital transformation, not just about the BIM, but the final scope and the final goal is much wider, and we are looking for the, let's say, more far future goal. It's called the digital model for the built environment, and so on and so on. So we need to collect the data, which could be machine readable. It can be trustworthy by the software solution, so we can use them for our efficiency. So there are two levels where we can find, where we need to find the common understanding between the public sector and all the supply chain and the manufacturers, because it's not just about the architects and a construction company, but it's a really wide part of it. It's really the manufacturers which are delivering lots of information into the management process through the whole life cycle. So we need to really get involved all the industry and find really the common solution for the digital transformation. And in this, we found the one, let's say, issue, or one. I feel it's because of let's say the marketing activities, and it's related with the stages how the, as called, the BIM is developing. That almost all organizations are really focused about the pilot projects and running the projects and how to do the projects and so on and so on. But after that, when you're asking them what they are doing with those data they are collecting under the projects, you can find that they cannot use it in a fully efficiency. So that's why we are really focusing about trying to force or motivate the organization to create their own organization strategy, how to implement really the digital information management inside the organization. So all the departments, all the parts of the organization can share the data. They can use the data, reuse the data. So they are not inputting and creating the data again and again. So that's very important for us to move organization into their own strategies. That's how we feel it right now.
That's a great point. From my experience, Jaroslav, I think we see a lot of organizations here in the US have asked for digital deliverables, building information models, but then once they get them, what they do with them is another challenge. And the providers quickly realize, if you're asking me for something that you're not really using, I don't pay as much attention to what I'm delivering as if I know it's going to be utilized for some process that really is part of your business model, your the way you operate. And I think that aspect of upskilling on the public side is really important. It takes some hard work to align the data that's coming in with the systems that you use internally. Has that been part of your thinking, Matthew, in Victoria, to think about, we're going to go out and ask for these digital builds, but then how do we line it up with our internal operations so that we are making use, and so the requirements reflect what we're actually going to do with the data that we're asking for?
Yeah, I think it's a universal challenge for all of us, that aspect, and we've got the similar situation where private is definitely ahead of public in their skills and capability, and even within government, we're finding that our project space is more advanced than our operations and maintenance space. So even what our government project delivery agencies are producing, we're losing that quality of detail because our asset and operation space is not as far along the journey. It's not as digitally mature. It's an enormous challenge because it's bogged down in regulation, legislation, legacy, all these intertwining factors of our big franchise operators, our railway operators, our roads operators that have complex contract models that we have to detangle. For us, it's a job of chipping away at them one by one, but also providing the incentives on future contracts to improve that practice. It's definitely not an area for short-term wins for us to close that gap. It's a long-term strategy, but it will have extremely long-term benefits. So we're really taking a slow burn and incremental approach on it.
And you have to start, and it does really build on itself. So getting the foundation in place, getting the requests and the paving the way, making the ground for delivering digitally is really important to be able to then continue to integrate. I think that's interesting at the project level, how the projects can use data most expediently. I was just at a conference here in the U.S., the International Highway Engineers Conference, and there's a lot of discussion about using the model as the legal document. So I don't know if it's interesting to me how that works. When we have paper, we can stamp the document and then we review that it was certified by the engineer. When we move to modeling, that's a whole nother challenge. How do you mark a model as being certified for the design to allow the project team to check it, which is an important use case. Yaroslav, is that something your program is addressing in Czech Republic?
Yes, that's one of the very important topic, as well as the very important topic in how to do the archiving the digital data for the long term, because when we are looking, let's say, not far future, when we do the paperless projects and all the data will be stored just by the digitized way, it's very important to find really sustainable archiving, trustworthy and legal confirmed data to be stored in, for example, national archives or archives for the specific organization. So that's the related topic with the let's say legal stamps or signing or specifically defining the amount of the data which is related to the specific date or specific milestone in the project. So that's very important as well. And as Matthew mentioned before, that we are really focused on the amount of the data and the information which is running through the project, and we are using here the principle which is quite important and it's advertised on the European level. It's called LOIN. It's the level of public procurers, and they are requiring the specific data from the projects.
Well, thanks, Yaroslav, and thanks, Matthew. I think the appearance of Alana is signaling that our time is up. Sadly, this is a conversation that could go on for quite some time. I think many interesting issues we've talked about, setting up to do pilots, working with our constituents, our stakeholders, getting them engaged in the process. Seen a lot of comments about incentivization, and I think that's an interesting topic, how to use that. What are the use cases that we're really trying to solve? So lots of good conversation, and I'm sure more to come. Thank you both for joining me today. and I look forward to continuing this more in the future. Alana, is that good? Do we pass over?
That's perfect, Roger. Yeah, pass it on over to me. And thank you all for the very interesting conversation on how procurement can be used as a lever to embed information management in public projects. We'll now close panel session 2 and open panel session 3, Government and Industry, working together to improve benefits for people and places. I will now introduce our speakers. Representing the United Kingdom is Fergus Heredith, Deputy Director for Construction and Materials at the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. Duly representing Colombia will be Daniel Gomez, Deputy Director at the National Planning Department, and Jonathan Bernal, Director of Infrastructure and Sustainable Energy at the National Planning Department. Representing Chile is Sebastián Manriquez, Subdirector for Plan BIM of the Chilean Corporación de Fomento de la Producción. And moderating the discussion will be Valentina Sarmiento, President of the BIM Network of Latin American Governments. Thank you, panelists. And now I will hand it off to our first speaker, Fergus Heredith.
Good day, everyone. It's an honour and a pleasure to be able to participate in the Global BIM General Assembly and to have the opportunity to talk about the UK's BIM journey over the past decade and our vision for the future of the built environment. During the past decade, BIM has transformed the design and delivery of construction in the UK. It has saved money, reduced carbon emissions and waste, and delivered better and safer built assets. But we have only started to realise its potential to drive improvements in construction or to contribute to the wider digitisation of the built environment. The story of the next decade will be how BIM and other digital technologies will transform the way in which we think about and manage our built environment. They will drive a transition to a systems-based approach that will link buildings, infrastructure, transport and energy networks, and enable us to transform the delivery of public services and promote greener and more sustainable towns and cities. The UK's BIM journey has already lasted over a decade. The 2011 construction strategy placed information management at the centre of the delivery of government construction projects by including the commitment that BIM Level 2 be used on all government construction projects from 2016, which is known as the BIM mandate. We recognise that achieving this aim would require coordinated action across government, the wider public and private sectors. So in 2011, the UK BIM Task Group was formed by the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, working with government departments and with industry through the UK's Construction Industry Council. Subsequently, we created the Public Sector BIM Working Group and the Home Nations Working Group, building links with local government in England and with the governments of Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland to promote a shared approach to the implementation of BIM. As BIM has developed, so have our structures. We created the Public Sector ISO Transition Working Group to support government departments and agencies to collectively plan and deliver a consistent transition to the new ISO 19650 BIM standard. As BIM has become established in the UK, we've also faced the challenge of ensuring the interoperable exchange of information. Interoperability is pivotal to delivering the whole life beneficial outcomes of BIM to clients in the construction industry through providing a means of information transfer between different proprietary technologies. In 2019, we created the BIM Interoperability Expert Group, which reported in April 2020 and proposed changes in the way that information is generated, processed and stored in order to deliver this. This has helped promote better understanding of processes and technologies, greater clarity around the approach and standards required, and in turn has helped suppliers to deliver what the government wants. Recognising the common global challenges in relation to infrastructure and construction, the UK also launched the BIM International Programme. This included working with the International Standards Organisation to develop the ISO 19650 standard for BIM and working bilaterally with countries in Latin America, Asia, Africa, and also with multilateral institutions such as the Inter-American Development Bank. We've also embedded the UK BIM programme into a wider technology programme to improve the built environment. through incorporating the UK's Centre for Digital Built Britain into the Construction Innovation Hub. This is developing a range of digital and manufacturing technologies for the construction sector and also supporting the UK's Digital Twin programme. BIM is an essential technology for the future of construction, supporting industrialisation and the utilisation of common designs and components across many different building types. Our National Digital Twin programme was established in 2017 following the publication of the data for the Public Good Report by the UK's National Infrastructure Commission. This recognised the value of information originating from the built environment and enshrined the principle that this should be used to deliver benefits for all users of the built environment in perpetuity. The focus of work on digital twins is to develop the information management framework. This is a set of protocols and standards for the secure and resilient gathering, analysing and exchange of information by infrastructure and buildings. This framework will, over time, support the creation of the National Digital Twin through allowing the networking of these different built assets. And these technologies are already being deployed in the UK. The Credo Climate Resilience Demonstrator, which we launched to coincide with the COP26 conference in the UK, brings together the energy, water and telecoms sectors to explore how connected data and information sharing, as well as data interoperability, can improve the climate adaptability and resilience of infrastructure. So there is a continuum between BIM and other technologies that will transform the built environment and deliver improved economic, social and environmental outcomes. The government recently published its vision for the built environment, which sets out an approach to managing the built environment through linking the societal objectives we want to achieve with the policies, infrastructure investment decisions, and operational management of the built environment that will deliver them. Digital information is the thread that links these activities and enables them to inform and support each other, which is why embedding BIM and other digital technologies is a key theme of the UK's construction playbook and also the value toolkit, which we are using to improve the way in which we procure and deliver construction in the UK. In conclusion, the UK's BIM journey of the last decade has seen us make enormous progress and embed this technology within infrastructure and construction delivery in the UK. But we are yet to realise the full potential of BIM or of wider digitisation, and the BIM journey of the next 10 years promises to be an even more interesting and exciting one. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Fergus. Next, I will hand it off to Danielle Gomez.
Muchas gracias por la invitación.
Thank you very much for the invitation to participate in the Global BIM Network. For us, it's a great opportunity to share our experience in the formulation, implementation, design, follow-up of the national strategy for the implementation of the BIM methodology in Colombia. I want to tell you 4 things in this intervention to begin with this panel. One of them, I'd like to tell you how the BIM strategy was developed in Colombia. There are 2 important background items. One is the policies for digital transformation, 2019 policy for digital transformation and AI in Colombia. That was the first policy, an umbrella policy, important one for this government, and is closing to generate the digital transformation in Colombia and looking to increase productivity. And within that strategy, it included the entire digital transformation of infrastructure, construction, production sectors, and also the government. And so then this first policy is an important milestone to generate a framework so that for the implementation of methodologies and technologies that are different, such as BIM. BIM at this time already had several initiatives that were isolated, and an effort was required to consolidate all these experiences into one single strategy. The first thing that was done was to create a BIM working group that unified all these efforts, in particular from the private sector, represented by the BIM4 Forum for Colombia, the academic sector, which also actively participated, and of course from the national government of this, from the nationally, with the leadership of the National Planning Department, the Ministry of Transportation, of Housing, of the Treasury, the National Development Financial Company, FDN, but also thinking about involving the territorial entities and subnational entities for 2020, when there were some developments in this BIM strategy, and the working group BIM had been developing a strategy. There was an important milestone in 2020 in the middle of the pandemic also, with the signing of the Memorandum of Understanding between the UK government and the FDN, the signing of this MOU, which involved all the entities that were important nationally in terms of infrastructure, construction, planning, policy, 14 entities total, was a milestone and an important gas pedal to move forward in the consolidation of a national strategy for BIM. The memorandum led to not only an acceleration because of the articulation that we achieved, but also to an exchange of knowledge, consulting, work hand in hand with consultants with the experience of the UK in the BIM implementation, and to involve all the sectors. It was a strategy that was truly triple helix with the state, with companies, with the academic sector, guaranteeing a continuity and an articulation of all that BIM strategy. We worked on over 30 working tables, integrating also the vision from public entities, territorial, very important, a key milestone with the ministries related to issues of construction and infrastructure, and achieving a concerted effort endorsed by all sectors. So how was the collaboration facilitated? How was the collaboration facilitated with all the government? I think that there were elements of the BIM strategy, clear backbone, 3 lines. 1, entities got courses, workshops to strengthen their knowledge and capacities in BIM issues. And secondly, there was the structuring of the development of the strategy with actors, all these entities, technical team of all these entities were involved. And especially at first, doing an awareness of the benefits of this strategy at the level of productivity, at the level of effectiveness, timing, costs. And that was key, so that we all actively participated in the formulation of the strategy. The FDN, the National Planning Department, which is the National Planning Department, which is called upon to coordinate and articulate actions in the government, had a fundamental role, and it was called upon to lead and articulate and to have a particular leadership in the elaboration and subsequent adoption of the BIM strategy in the country. The connecting of territories, companies for urban development, the 14 entities that were in charge of the management of infrastructure nationally for all the methods of transportation and construction, airports, roads, railways, waterways, housing, all of them. They participated very actively structuring this first version of the BIM strategy that was later socialized with other ministries and other entities, such as the Environmental Ministry, Defense, Education, Culture, Energy, ICTs. So truly, we are extending transversally the use of this tool that will be key for competitiveness and productivity within the digital transformation of Colombia. With the private sector and the industry, a work that was truly special, in particular, the Colombian Chamber of Construction of Camacol, the CCI, the Colombian Chamber of Infrastructure, had an important role with all their affiliates to develop this strategy, this roadmap for the implementation of BIM that has a period of 5-6 years for its implementation, full implementation in the entire national policy. It's very important to have that vision of increasing productivity, growth, and sustainability. That was like the guiding principle. And then we consolidated a vision of reactivation based indeed on sustainability, digitalization, where the work of the group, the BIM group, and the consolidation of the BIM strategy will be fundamental elements. not only was it important, industry, guilds, labor union, and that also spends a lot of resources. They're capital intensive, and so any saving is important. Any efficiency is going to have an important impact. And so also there was work with the academic sector, and that was very important, in particular within the BIM initiative academic forum. So all the work strategy has articulated different efforts from national, from private sector, from academic sector, to be able to generate that roadmap of BIM methodology and the adoption of BIM methodology training entities nationally, but also the private sector. The private sector has to generate capacities, and in particular with these SMEs, but also with the big companies too. We have to generate these capacities and this understanding within this roadmap. And so from its structuring, the vision for the BIM strategy is a strategy to connect all the players in the national territory. It's a roadmap that's active, that we have to continue to develop and continue implementing, which is not written in stone. It has a vision for the long term. It started in 2020. It finished in 2026 with the implementation, the comprehensive implementation of BIM nationally. And it has 4 fundamental pillars. 1, communication dissemination. We have to understand the importance of BIM, its impact on productivity, its impact on growth, on job creation, efficiencies, reactivation, and on the consolidation of sectors with efficiency. 2, public leadership. The public sector sends clear signals in terms of key investments to generate adoption dynamics for new technologies. 3rd, development of capacities. The entire line of generating capacities in the public sector, in territorial entities, in the private sector is fundamental. And finally, the collaborative framework, which is that action to articulate the private sector to academic sector, to the public sector, to generate knowledge, to share knowledge, to generate capacities for the nationalization, standardization of international standards and guides, templates, material to be able to implement the BIM strategy. So a great development with a long track record behind it, and within digital transformation, and with the participation of all the involved players, we're highly pleased to participate in the Global Network, which will be a fundamental space, and also to share experiences and to recognize successes, but also failures, experiences, and lessons learned. And for all of us to be able to continue with this community of interest, moving forward in the implementation of BIM, with a view of sustainability, reactivation, and digitalization and productivity for the long term of the industries of all our countries. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, Daniel. Now I will hand it off
to you. Thank you very much, Daniel.
Hola, ¿cómo están todos? Muchas gracias.
Hello, how is everybody doing? Thank you very much to the organizers for inviting us to be able to chat about this key issue, which is how the government, together with industry, can work jointly to generate benefits, in this case for people and the governments. As I mentioned before, I'm Sebastián Manriquez. I'm the Deputy Director for Plan BIM in Chile. In this case, I represent Chile. So to be able to begin, first I'd like to mention that one of the initial points of how was, in this case, the strategy developed, this BIM plan, part of the public institutions in Chile, towards the working with industry, in which each one of the players which are relevant in the industry. The BIM implementation strategy in Chile is based on using the purchasing power that the state has to achieve this modernization within the construction industry as a whole, public sector, private sector, and academic sector, and having main focus of people, of course. And so the main objective of the implementation of BIM within the state is to achieve an increasing productivity and sustainability of the industry, of the construction industry at large, architecture, engineering, construction. To do this, we've defined a series of specific objectives, mainly increasing productivity and the competitiveness in the construction sector to be able to increase the traceability and transparency of the projects. It's something key because of being able to improve the quality and efficiency of the projects throughout their life cycle, and of course improve the predictability and control of construction, both in delivery times as well as costs. And one of the objectives that we have with the BIM plan BIM within Chile is to be able to foster the use of common standards to promote a more collaborative industry, and of course to be able to ensure compliance of building permits, of all regulations that exist, and of course reduce approval times for those building permits. That helps mainly to that increase in productivity. In Plan BIM, we have 5 lines of action. It starts with institutionality and strategy, standardization, human capital, and enabling technologies, and of course something very important, which is communication and dissemination. So these 5 lines of action are the ones that allow Plan BIM within Chile's public institutions to promote digital transformation within the industry, and mainly to be able to break down the barriers and the gaps, both in human capital as well as in process and standardization, but mainly in the resistance to change that exists within the construction sector. How was collaboration facilitated? In this case, through or within government itself. We have to understand that there are different sectors that have been involved, mainly the state and the private sector. Those are the main players who, overall, in 2016, they decided to create like a vision from a public policy to be able to create a Plan BIM, this initiative, okay, that looks towards the implementation of BIM within the state of Chile, and the Ministry of Economy, the Ministry of the Treasury, of Public Works, of Housing, all these entities here came together as within Chile as to be able to join through an agreement, and they need to plan and understand how these BIM implementations are going to be conducted. That's why in 2018, 2019, there were a total of 18 institutions were involved, from the Administrative Corporation of the Judiciary, the National Police Force, the Investigative Police, the Ministry of the Interior, even the state mining company, Codelco, which came together within this agreement that seeks basically to implement BIM within the state in a standardized and organized manner. So the dates and the goals that were defined in Chile, the first requirement for BIM on the part of the state was in 2012. It was spontaneous and part of the team, so it wasn't standardized. The teams, the people understood that this generated value, but there wasn't a clear vision of what the goal was that had to be met. And so in 2015, there's a presidential announcement that is Plan BIM is promoted and created. Its beginning is 2016. Plan BIM is created with the definition of 2 main goals. The first, from 2016 to 2020, is to require BIM within public projects standard in a standardized manner. That was met last year, where the request is initiated for information through the EIRs within the public institutions in a standardized manner. And in 2025, we have the integration of BIM within the platform of the Ministry of Housing, which is called DOM Online, which allows you online to do the requirements for private projects. And so there's a series of actions of these years. Develop a role matrix, develop the first BIM requirement for public projects in 2018, and development of the BIM standard for public projects in 2019. How did the government collaborate with the industry? Well, this is very important. The goal of BIM, the BIM implementation within the state, as I told you, is to increase the productivity and sustainability within the construction industry. And to do that, we work as Plan BIM, with part of the institutions that have in charge of BIM. We work 3 states: the state, academic sector, and the private sector. With the state, it's mainly about doing a methodological transference so that they're trained to be able to meet and conduct the activities and the actions required within the BIM implementation, whether it's understanding the benefits and also being able to use the tools, technological tools that allow them to do that task. And then we work with the private sector, mainly dissemination and support for companies to be able to train them, and so that they're able to respond to these standardized requirements of the state. And academic sector also did dissemination and support for these academic institutions, so that they can be trained, the new professionals that come to work in the construction industry and those who are already working in the industry. So in this case, how do you deliver this strategy within or to the sector? Well, one of the main points that we work on with the government is the development of the information requirements, the BIM information requirements within each project. And for that, to do that, we work since 2016 with the Ministry of Public Works, Housing, Administrative Corporation of the Judiciary, Chilean Air Force, and the Undersecretariat for Regional Development. But to develop, indeed, these documents, a series of documents for different typologies that allow us to have these information requests available so that the industry can use them and so that the state can require them, and institutions, in this case, the private companies, can respond coherently and in a standardized way. Another point is the adoption of different international ISO standards. Since 2021, now it's been several years. Until 2020, we had adopted 7 ISO standards, mainly 19650, mainly Part 125, the 12006, which is very important also for standardization for issues in Chile, and now in 2021 we've adopted 6 more standards. The numbers we see here. And another important issue is that in addition, we're also working on the participation and study and development of some standards through mirror committees, which were created in 2017 and 2018 in Chile, the participation in certain ISO standards. And that was very important for the industry to begin to understand how this strategy of BIM implementation also deals, that they also have something to say with this. The BIM projects, objects or minimum, or some guides, certain specific parameters.
También tenemos el e-learning de BIM, donde pudimos capacitar, en este caso, a más de 10.000 personas dentro de un año que estuvo disponible este e-learning. Fue 100% gratuito, donde se inscribieron más de 16.000 personas de 32 países. Y donde las personas que hicieron este curso partieron...
People that did this course, 25% of concepts, and we managed to take them up to 90%.
¿Cuáles son los siguientes pasos que tenemos? Bueno, principalmente una plataforma de automatización de proyectos que se llama, que permite a través de información estructurada, a través de
structured information, automatic review of certain rules, quality control, 58 rules for specific project requirements, and 12 specific rules for Chile's General Ordinance of Urbanism and Construction Law. This platform allows appointed parties to deliver us models through IFC, what for, so that in this case, the ministry, the appointing party, can receive this information, put it on the platform, and realizer can access the information with different ways without needing of having any knowledge of BIM. We're also developing an observatory for public projects where we've analyzed 1,870 projects between 2013 and 2020. Public Works, Health, and the Administrative Corporation of the Judiciary. And they broke it down 70% of the projects, 28% infrastructure, and 1.5% mixed projects. And preliminary results that we have today is that 20% of the investment was carried out, was required with BIM. And if we look at it at a specific department, which is the Architectural Department of the Ministry of Public Works, we can see the growth. At last year, 2020, over 50% of the investment in public projects in the design stage was required with BIM. And to wrap up, another essential point that we've seen in these steps was to achieve the continuity of Plan BIM. September of this year, we managed to extend it until December 2021, which we're very happy about. Finally, I'd like to thank everybody here, and we look forward to the question and answer session.
Thank you, Sebastian, and thank you to all of our panelists. As a reminder, today's event is being held in English, Spanish, French, and Japanese. You should see at the bottom of your screen the option to select your language preference, which you should select now. I will now invite all panelists to turn cameras on and pass moderation to Valentina for our question and answer session. We also invite you in the audience to let us know about government and industry partnership in your country by participating in our Slido poll. Valentina, over to you.
Muchas gracias, Alana. I'm going to speak in Spanish because they told me it's better if we feel comfortable. So please turn your channel to English. Y en este momento voy a invitar a Sebastián, a Jonathan y Fergus. Please come and join us. Para dar inicio a esta conversación partiendo claramente de lo que ustedes nos han contado y de cómo hemos visto esta transformación del ambiente de la construcción. Entonces, ahorita me acompaña Sebastián, veo a Jonathan.
So here we have Sebastián, and we also have Jonathan and Fergus. We started this panel and listening to the conversations that we had, like based on what Matthew and Roger said, we saw in the chat, Fergus, you told us about, Fergus, are you listening to me? Can you hear me? Well, while Fergus is getting connected, let us start with Jonathan. Hello, Jonathan. We also had a question when we had the IDB, Claudia and Milena from the EU. They talked about the pandemic and the reactivation of economy, and we talk about new technologies. What is the role of the BIM methodology, especially in Colombia? And how can you articulate this with the industry, which is one of the main stakeholders for the reactivation? Thank you very much, Valentina, and thank you very much to the Global Network for allowing me to share here. When it comes to economic reactivation in Colombia, I would like to share with you this large infrastructure projects that were crucial for our country to see that we are now at a growth rate of 12.3%. Only 3 economies in the world are above that level. And that is due to the decisions that we undertook in the midst of the pandemic. First, the infrastructure has 1,000 job posts. So we had 3 main axes for public policy, which was connecting territories, conectando territorios, and that was a policy, government policy, national policy, primary infrastructure corridors that historically had not seen any investment, but because we were thinking in our Colombian Marshall Plan, and we wanted to reactivate it likewise. And we knew that in order to reactivate economy, we needed to do that. We had these corridors. We invested $1.2 billion, first project. In tandem, we did connecting territories and concluding those works that needed minute financing, but they had just been stagnated for a while. So we invested over $2.3 billion US, and we generated about 300,000. So we had 430,000 new job posts. And then Compromiso por Colombia, which is commitment with Colombia, another infrastructure project that actually gathers those 4.3 billion, and it generates roughly those 500,000 job posts. We started to pilot some projects in BIM. In the case of Colombia, the Ministry of Transportation is the head of the sector, but they do have subsecretaries or undersecretaries. Then you have the Ministry of Public Works, the National Agency for Infrastructure that deals with the PPD and concessions, and the Civil Air Organization that deals with public works and infrastructure works for airports. Then we have Ministry of Transportation that deals also with the private sectors. And they started to generate projects in BIM. For example, we've seen it nationally, and we've seen it at a local level. We're talking about a public transportation line for several cities worth 6.5 billion. Then we have a railroad, which amounts to about $600, and then harbors and ports for over $430 million that are using BIM. So BIM is crucial because it generates transparency in order to generate this over 500,000 new job posts. So, but we didn't want to stay there. This was first. Then we saw that there was an advantage at the mid and long-term place, which are the bicentennials or the 5th generation of concessions in it. We are fully intermodal. Monday, with the president of the country and the ministries, they approved a memorandum that we have been working on for over 1 year. So we do have environmental sustainability, trust and transparency in the institutions, working with grassroots in the community, but working under a collaborative framework. So this 5th generation includes BIM in every single project for the country. For example, with 5G, we have over 2 of projects that amount for 12.6 billion United States dollars. So we needed to review, to reassess how we can be collaborative in those projects that have been generated before. How can we foresee challenges? And how can we move forward and correct what we have found in the 4th generation of our projects, which the 4th generation amounted for $10 billion US. And we are we believe that by August of next year, out of those 29 concessions, all of them will be completed. So that's what BIM is for us. When you talk reactivation of economy, of the economic sectors, it's crucial in all sectors, whether construction, building, or transportation. And this is how we think. We are also seeing how we can be more efficient when it comes to resource use, because that will in turn save us money. So Valentina, BIM, that's what it means to us. It's pretty much everything when it comes to the reactivation of economy. Thank you very much, Jonathan. Quite interesting. All those plans and transformation plans, at least in the Colombian context, go hand in hand with a very important and paramount when it comes to digitalization. Fergus, this is for you. You've led the road when it comes to the international arena, when it comes to transformation of what we've done in the UK. And we saw some questions in the chat. Not only technology transformation, but what about the idiosyncrasy? What about the cultural change in the UK? You lead the way worldwide. I mean, we do, but you need to take ownership of the project. You need to change the culture. You need to change the idiosyncrasy. Otherwise, it just doesn't work. We're doomed. And you did it. So give us the recipe for success.
Well, I think if anyone finds the recipe for success, please share it with us, because I certainly wouldn't say that we've solved the problem in every area. But I think the way in which we see BIM is that BIM is not fundamentally a technology. BIM is really a business change process. It enables organizations to collaborate with other organizations more effectively to deliver better outcomes for everybody. But it only works as a technology if you have the right framework for that collaboration. And part of that, I think it's the legal framework, it's the nature of the contract and the terms of the contract that apply to people and what they have to do. And that can relate to everything from payment practices through to dispute resolution, through to requirements around information sharing, so the standard to which you will work to in relation to BIM, but also whether you create something like a common data environment which everybody in the project team has access to. But it's also about the way in which the project is managed and the structures and the processes that you put in place and the delivery model for the project. All of these things exercise a really powerful influence on how effectively that project is governed and how well BIM is used. And I think the lesson that we've learned in the UK is that you can't underestimate the importance of those factors. So probably over the last year or 2 years, we've invested as much time in looking at those areas around the the procurement process, how you contract and how you include the right provisions within contracts, as we have in supporting the development of BIM and undertaking things like training in the technology, because we recognise the two have to come together to really make the best use of the potential that BIM has to make a better built environment.
Gracias, Fergus. Y de hecho, es algo que...
Thank you very much, Fergus. Actually, that is related to what Sebastian said. You need a roadmap. You need to strengthen training. You need to strengthen policy. You need to strengthen harmonization and standardization. And just like you say, it has to be pretty much a gearbox where all the gears work together, and we need to build this ecosystem within building sector, within construction. And before I go, I see Alana, I would like to ask Sebastian here, at least in Latin America, Chile it's another role model that many other countries follow. In your building of the strategies, we have supported your good practices, but it is some of the countries that worked on this digital transformation. What is your message for those countries that have not yet embraced it, take ownership of that digital transformation? What is the first step? Well, thank you very much, Valentina, for the question, and thank you to my co-panelists. I'm going to try to speak slowly because probably I knocked them down in my previous intervention, but this said, there was a mistake in my presentation. I should have said 2022 and not 2021 when it comes to BIM for our country. That said, there's no recipe, just like Fergus said. Otherwise, if there was a panacea, we wouldn't be here sitting and talking about it. But Adam was very clear when he started this summit, this seminar. It depends on people. This is people-centric. And just like Fergus say, we cannot see technology as being the end, the mean, and everything. And I believe that what is really important and what it has allowed us in Chile to implement BIM. Of course, we have had close contact with the UK, and we've seen it. You need to work within a team that works in the implementation, but it has to come top down from high up in the government. It has not just has to be isolated. You cannot work in silos. It has taken us 3 stages. It has taken us years. We needed a multidisciplinary team of professionals that generate supporting all the different stakeholders in the policy making, in the project management, because at the end of the day, many government offices just want to implement, whether it's MOH, Ministry of Health, of Ministry of Housing, or whatever. So we need to teach them. And at the beginning, you might have conflicts because they need to understand that this is a question of processes of project management. When you see that there's resistance to change, a lot of people try to leave them away and say, no, you stay out because you're interference. You have to do the total opposite. You need to bring them in and teach them because they probably have a preponderant role in the execution of the project. So we need to avoid those conflicts. I believe that to the extent possible, aside from having the money, having the funds, having the financing, is you need to have teams that are multidisciplinary and that really want to work together and share. But this does not have a perfect framework. This does not take 1 year or 1 month. This is just going to be an ongoing change because you need to change the culture. You need to change all the processes. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. I wish I had more time, but when we see Alana's face, we know she's coming and she's going to close our conversation. Thank you so much.
Panelists, for your thoughts on cross-government cooperation and public-private partnerships to harness the power of digital in national and global construction sectors. Also, I have to say a special thank you to our translators who have certainly demonstrated their expertise today. You may all now turn your cameras off, which I see you have. It's clear that government and industry collaboration is a key ingredient for successful transformation of the built environment. And with that, I will close our knowledge exchange panels. Thank you again to all of our speakers and moderators for sharing their perspectives and experience with Global BIM Network community. Your views form an important part of the network's collective knowledge, and we will be sharing your presentation. Adam Matthews.
Recording in progress.
I would like to just pick up what Sebastian was saying, that there's no panacea. I'm going to take the idea also of a recipe. It's no one single recipe, although what I do believe we're starting to see are common ingredients that we can all share between ourselves. Jaroslav said something really interesting early on in our discussion, which was about confidence. I think the confidence is a really big part of this. I think the public sector need confidence. They need confidence that this is helpful, that it's going to address some of those policy goals. We heard Fergus speak a moment ago about something very similar to what Milena was talking about, of course, which is about the sustainable built environment. Claudia mentioned that as well, that there are these large objectives. Of course, there is cost efficiency as well as the sustainable built environment objectives that these governments are trying to drive towards. And we need to share best practice in how to get there. The chat window I saw, there was a huge amount of discussion in the chat. The public sector doesn't have all of that knowledge. So I think the key lesson from all that for me, or takeaway, is that we want to have access to that information. We want to share that information. And that's really the simple idea behind the network as a whole, but also the call for knowledge that we've posted, and perhaps if we could post that again into the chat. We want to see those materials, those guidances, documents and tools, so that we can advance this agenda together. So that would be my first sort of thought, is picking up from Jaroslav's point initially about giving confidence, and I think the network helps to do that, and these discussions help to do that as well. I think there's also confidence to the private sector that's helpful. It's confidence to invest. This is clearly a large undertaking. It's a social and technological change. To pick up the last conversation, there's a tremendous amount of cultural aspects that need to change, but first of all, it does involve some of those skills, training, expertise development, and I think providing confidence to the private sector that that's going to be welcomed by the public sector, I think is a big. This isn't going backwards, I would say, is the other takeaway from this conversation. It's clearly moving forwards. Digital information management, BIM, I've seen various different versions of it. I think we understand what it is when we see it, and I think we're seeing that is not reducing or diminishing, and it is only going to increase. We saw the tremendous growth in this topic from just a few years, really. So I think that's also helpful, and it's why we put together the roadmap. It's why we set out an idea for, well, this is happening. How do we do this in a consistent way, in a way that's helpful to others and helpful to those objectives that Claudia and Fergus and others were referencing that we're trying to achieve? So I think this all is reaffirming in several ways, but there are some questions. So I'm going to just tackle some of the questions which came out for me of the discussion. One of them was around the private sector involvement. There are 18 million people approximately employed in Europe, and I'm going to estimate there's got to be over 100 million people globally, way in excess of 100 million people, I'm sure, that are employed by the construction sector globally. So when you're thinking about a sector that's worth 13% of global GDP, that is also pivotal to economic and social development of all countries, really. I think then you've got to think, how do we talk? How do we have a conversation between the public sector and the private sector and the other organizations that were represented here today? So the academic side, the professional institutions and trade bodies and others. So how do we all have a conversation? We can't just do this once a year or twice a year, of course. It's got to be more meaningful around certain topics. So we'd welcome thoughts and ideas on that from those of you that have a private sector representation or academic representation. We'd really welcome your contribution to that. And again, get in touch with those IDs that we've shared, the international email, or contact us through the Global BIM Network website. Which leads on to another thought, which is sign up, of course. That's partly what this event is. It's about growing our community. So sign up if you're a public sector representative. We'd really like to hear from you as well if you would like to get involved in the network itself and to participate in some of our conversations. I hope what we've shared here is that we're an inclusive group, that we've got an incredibly diverse and rich, broad set of languages, cultures, different levels of maturity that we've got going on in our community here. So I would really encourage you to get in touch with us if you're from, and also equally, if you're private sector, yes, for the moment you won't be part of this community meetings, of course, but
firstly,
I'm sure we can
in
work
architecture and structure, we need to consider the surfaces of our project assets, which need to be modelled.
I really do look forward
we select whether there are areas and or rooms in the asset.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Well, thank you, Adam, for your final thoughts. And thank you to all of our speakers. And a special thank you to everyone tuning in from across the world. We're very happy to have you today. And we look forward to seeing you at our next Global BIM Network event in March. Goodbye for now.
Recording stopped.